Welcome to the Washington Heights Church podcast. We're so glad you're here. Each week, we bring you the latest Sunday message filled with God's Word to help strengthen your faith and deepen your walk with Christ. Whether you're tuning in from home, your commute, or anywhere in between, we're thrilled to have you join our community. So, grab a cup of coffee, find a cozy spot, and let's get started.
Well, today on this special day here, we are continuing a series called Killin it. And in just a moment, we're going to get to that. But I want to let you know, you've probably seen the pool over here. And when we're done with the message here, our band's going to come up and lead us in one more song. Hang around at the end because we have some people who are going to go public with their faith in Jesus today in the waters of baptism. There's nothing special about that water. There's nothing special about participating in that event. It is the grace and love of God that is special and makes us right with Him. And we want to celebrate that together with all of you. So let's talk about killing it. And a couple weeks ago, Mike did such a great job talking about bitterness and anger. Last week, we talked about guilt and shame. And today, we're going to talk about envy and comparison. And what we're looking at in this series are really issues that are common to the human experience. And no matter who we are, no matter what our example of it might be, I think we can all relate to these issues in some kind of way. But let me tell you what we're trying to ultimately do in this series. Not just point it out and say it's a reality, but we're trying to get beyond it. There was a theologian a couple hundred years ago, his name was John Owen, and he said these words. He said, "Be about the business of killing what is killing you." And so that's what we're doing in this series. Not just pointing out the issues, but trying to get them gone. I don't know how many of you have been mowing your lawn. You know, I've been busy doing that, and we've had some rain and all that. And I got to be honest with you, that as I'm mowing the lawn, and all of a sudden I go under a tree or kind of brush up against a tree, have you ever had that experience when a spider web, hits you in the face, or you feel it in your hair? And for me, there is nothing that can turn me quicker into a modern version of the Cowardly Lion from the Wizard of Oz than having that on me. And all of a sudden, the mower gets turned off and it is ugly. But here's the thing I've learned too, that if you just get rid of the web, but you don't get rid of the thing that spun the web, there's going to be another web. No matter how many times you get that on you and then eventually pull it off. And so what we're trying to do in this series is to get rid of the thing that is spinning these webs in our lives. So let's talk about what envy is. And we're going to jump into a psalm here. This is Psalm 73 in the Old Testament. A psalm of Asaph. Truly God is good to Israel, to those who are pure in heart. But as for me, my feet had almost stumbled. My steps had nearly slipped, for I was envious of the arrogant. And notice, he's not going to be envious of their arrogance. What is he envious of? When I saw the prosperity of the wicked. So I looked at people's lives, and I think we've all had this sort of experience when we go, why do good things happen to bad people? And I'm a good person, and why do I have as good a things happening in my life as some of the bad people do? And as I look at my life in comparison with them, I envy what they have, and I do not have. And then he goes on, he says, for they have no pangs until death. They live long lives, and they're not the best people around. Their bodies are flat, fat, and sleek. Now, I think we need to understand, why is he envying their fat bodies? Now, let me just tell you something from a few thousand years ago, right? And today we kind of worship being slim, but back then, when you lived day to day, and you were not sure that you were going to have food on your table, to actually have some extra weight on you was a sign of prosperity and health and all that came along with it, because everybody was skinny. I mean, really skinny back in those days. So he's looking at people who have enough, not just for today, they've had enough, even beyond that, and maybe for some time. They are not in trouble as others are. They are not stricken like the rest of mankind. And this guy's just living a life of comparison of his life with others, saying, why are they doing so much better than I am? And in comparison to me, they are doing well, and they shouldn't. So let's ask this question. What is envy? Let's just define it. And I want to start with a story to help us understand what this is. And maybe you've seen a picture or a movie with this guy in it. His name is John Gielgud. He's a very famous British actor, and he was well recognized for a long time. But in a moment of honesty and clarity, here's what he said one day. When Sir Laurence Olivier, and let's put that guy up there as well, played Hamlet in 1948, the critics raved, I wept. When the critics raved for him, I wept. He was rejoicing, and therefore I was weeping. So what is envy? It's not only comparing ourselves to others, but beyond that, there is a sense in which we begrudge somebody else's life. We want somebody else's life, and we resent the fact that they have it and I don't. And so when we're talking about, what the definition of envy is, wanting somebody else's life, begrudging them for it, and when they're happy, I'm unhappy, and when they're unhappy, I'm happy. You ever had one of those moments where you hear that something bad has happened to somebody that you envy, and you get a little bit of that sense of the Grinch in when he stole the Christmas presents, and he gets that big kind of evil smile on his face. But on the outside, we say, oh, that's so sad, to hear something like that. But on the inside, we're kind of dancing and having a party inside of our own hearts. That is envy. And let me, just ask you this, and I think you know the answer to this question already. Isn't it easier today than ever to compare our lives to other people? Did you ever, have a great day, but then you get home and you jump on Facebook and all of a sudden it wasn't a great day anymore? Because you see what somebody else is doing. Like, they're there again? Didn't they just get back from there? I think somebody's running up a little bit of credit card in their life, credit card debt. Somebody needs a little Dave Ramsey in their life. They got a little bit hog wild there. Or you look at a picture and you go, hey, I know everybody in that picture. Everybody in that picture is one of my friends, and they're at a party. And who's missing? I am. But they seem to be having a great time. You ever seen that picture that people inevitably post where their feet are by a pool and they're holding the book? Have you ever had that feeling inside yourself in that moment of thinking, you know what, first of all, nobody ever wants to see your feet under any conditions. But seeing your feet on vacation, is like, a double, negative there. I hate that pool that you're sitting by. I hate that book that you're reading. And I hate your feet, being on vacation. Well, my feet are back here doing work. And I don't know how you got there, but I am here and you are there. It's never been easier to compare. It's never been easier to envy. And I think we probably know, and have a good measure of what it is. But let's ask this question as well. Why deal with envy? Because I think if we look around the world with the situations that are unfolding and some of the big scale, serious issues, that are happening in our world, we go, is this really that big of a deal, in the big picture of things? Envy, okay, I kind of get, that it's an issue, but is it really that big of a deal? And I think the Bible points out that, there's something about our heart and our character that is at stake here. But let's be real clear about something. We're not talking about what makes us right with God, right? That is by God's grace and God's love alone. What we're talking about here is being liberated from some of the webs that entangle us and drain the joy out of our lives. And that is what envy does. So how do we get free of that? What are we supposed to do with it? Why deal with envy? First of all, envy hides itself. It's one of those things that is not so easy to spot. There are a lot of other issues the Bible talks about that are pretty clear in our lives, but envy is one of those things that we can keep it really well hidden. And right, we talked about John Gielgud, and we talked about looking at Facebook, and that's all a very personal and private thing. In our honest moments, are we willing to admit, you know what, while that person was laughing, I was weeping? While that person was living a happy life, I was struggling. Just this past week, I took the opportunity to just jot down a few things that I have envied people, for. And this is not a full list. This is just a brief list. So maybe you can think about what your list might include. But there are a few things from back in the day. I used to run. I envied people that could run faster than me. I envy people who are smarter than me. Back in the day, way back in the day, kind of in the high school time, I envied guys who had cuter girlfriends. Actually, I envied guys who had any girlfriends at all. I envy people who lift weights and put on bulk for obvious reasons. I envied football players. I envy people who are naturally extroverted, because I am not. People who are better pastors and speakers and writers and leaders than me. Parents of perfect families with perfect children and perfect pets who go on perfect vacations and move from success to success. People who get a tan without turning fluorescent red first. People who are great at confrontation. People who never pout or use a silent treatment when they're mad. People who are more articulate, the movers and the shakers with perfect hair and resume and clothes and do it all effortlessly. People who never break a sweat. People who have it all together. People who don't have an issue with envy. If you don't have an issue with envy today, I envy you for the fact that you do not have an issue with envy. And that list could be a lot longer if I'd spent a lot longer on it. But here's the thing. Those things are so easily hidden. And what this issue requires is a measure of honesty about ourselves, about who we are, and about the things that we often, just have happen inside of our hearts and souls. They don't always play themselves out in lifetime before ourselves or before other people. And this is an issue that hides itself very well. Why deal with envy? Second, it ends contentment. That envy is the place where contentment ends. And as soon as I start playing the comparison game, all of a sudden what I have is not good enough anymore. And maybe it's like we are going to renovate a kitchen and we're going to eat our meals in the garage for a while, but it's going to be worth it because the new kitchen is going to be great. And then we get it done, and we're happy with our new kitchen and all that came along with it and the sacrifices we made along the way. And then we go to somebody else's house, and it's like Joanna Gaines showed up, to decorate this kitchen, and it is beautiful. They have the soft closed doors and everything. And the moment that we do the comparison game, the contentment ends. And could it be that a critical spirit that is inside of us and that manifests itself in different ways? Yeah, I don't like them. I'm not sure why. They always seem to be, flaunting things in everybody's face. They always seem to be, just kind of oblivious, to everything that's happening around. Could it be that the critical spirit that we speak maybe to people who are in a very tight circle of ours, that behind it is really a fuel of envy? That we compared and we desire and we begrudge what they have and we want what they have, but we're not going to come out and say that because it seems so petty. But instead, we'll tear them down a little bit because we want them to be knocked down a few notches. And I'll tell you what envy does when it comes to our relationship with God. Not only do we do that game with each other and kind of maybe bring people down a little bit, could it be that in that we're making a statement to God, God, you are not a fair God. You have not been fair to me. You have blessed them and you have not blessed me. And so God, I'm going to take this matter into my own hands and I'm going to bring them down a few pegs. And could it be that it leads us to enjoy the failure of other people? Right? When we praise, we celebrate when other people succeed. One of the things that I enjoyed about running events, when I could do that before my knees went bad, is that in a running event, when you're moving along there and you pass somebody else, you know what 9 times out of 10 would happen? That person would say something like this: "You're doing great. You're looking strong. Keep going. Finish well." And I don't know how many times in those events I thought, man, what would life be like if it would be a little bit more like that? Where people would celebrate the success of others rather than see it as some sort of comparison and competition. But boy, envy is that thing that can fuel some of that toxicity that we have inside of our spirit that becomes very critical, very negative, and very accusatory to other people. So why deal with envy? It hides itself. It ends contentment. All of a sudden, I'm not happy with what I have anymore. It also causes feelings of superiority or inferiority, and neither one of those honors God. So if I compare myself and I come out looking good, I feel superior. If I compare myself and I come out, feeling like I'm behind, I feel inferior. Neither one of those is what God has for us. That who we are before God is what he thinks of who we are, regardless of our circumstances, regardless of what makes up our lives in those moments. We talked about this last week, but maybe you're familiar with the story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. God gave them everything that they could want and then some. And what did they do? They got this sense, this message from God's adversary, that on the day that you do the thing that God has told you not to do, the day that you eat of the knowledge of the tree of good and evil, you will become like God. They compared themselves and found themselves wanting. And then on the other side of that, and the fallout of what God had said was going to be the reality, that in the day that you do it, you shall surely die. You will be separated from the God who made you and loves you. They felt inferior. So the desire to be superior led to the reality of being inferior, but on either end of that spectrum, it is not what God has for us. And so why deal with envy? Because it has nothing to do with the kind of life that God has called us to live. It has nothing to do with being liberated from so many of the things that entangle us, the webs that get us all junked up with the lives that we have. Why deal with envy? Understanding envy helps you understand your own heart. And there is a theologian and a philosopher, his name is Soren Kierkegaard, lived about 100 years ago, and he basically made this sort of statement. He said, we have been called to live our lives before God, to be in relationship with God and to get our sense of identity and value from God. But there are ways in which we can substitute other things into that place. And the thing that often, confuses us or is a little bit hidden from us is, what is it that I have substituted into that place where God was made to be, where God should occupy? And there are times and ways in which we don't even recognize that. If you're familiar with the movie Rocky, right? Came out, 30 years ago or something like that. And Rocky is the ultimate underdog, and he's been given a title shot to fight Apollo Creed. And the night before the fight, he goes to the arena and looks at all the pictures of Apollo Creed and sees how great and awesome he is as a boxer. He goes back to Adrian, his girlfriend, and he says, I can't win, but if I can just go the distance, then I'll know that I'm not a bum. So boxing, success, at least as he was going to define it, was going to be proof to him that he was not a bum, that his life had purpose and his life had meaning. And Soren Kierkegaard gives us this perspective that says if we substitute anything for God's perspective of us, of God's understanding of who we are, and that our sense of identity and value comes from him and not from something else, but there is the very real opportunity for every single person to put something else in that place that would say, if I get blank, I won't be a bum. And one of the ways that we can identify what that might be is for us to understand the envy that makes its way into our lives. And it can help us understand where our battle might be, where that web is that might entangle us, and give us an opportunity to break free from that thing that can so easily junk us up. So that's why we should deal with it. Now, let's ask this question, right? So what is it? Why deal with it? Now, where do I take my envy? Back in Psalm 73. But when I thought how to understand this, it seemed to me like a wearisome task until I went into the sanctuary of God. Now, that's not just talking about some square footage where God resides. This is somebody who has a very personal encounter with God. And the language in here is very experiential. This isn't somebody who sat down and took notes on a lesson. This isn't somebody who went through a ritual. This is somebody who had a dramatic and personal encounter with the God of the Bible. Then I discerned their end. Who's he talking about? The people that he envied. Truly, you set them in slippery places. You make them fall to ruin. There's another day coming. The way it is today is not the way that it's always going to be, and God has a bigger picture for me that can set my perspective straight, that right here and right now, I feel like you might not have been fair to me, God, but there is another day coming, and it will be a day of God's choosing. But when I thought how to understand this, it seemed to me to be a wearisome task until I went into the sanctuary of God. Check out what he says next. When my soul was embittered and I was pricked in heart, I was brutish and ignorant. I was like a beast towards you. And in his moment of honesty and clarity about his own envy, you know what he's saying? In my relationship with God, I had some bad feelings towards you, God, that you had shortchanged me. And that somehow you were being good to bad people, but you weren't blessing the good people. And oh, by the way, I'm one of the good people. And when he says that he was like an animal, basically he had broken off, contact with God. And he was not, feeling warm fuzzies toward God. He was not really engaged in his relationship with God. But then something changed. Check this out. Nevertheless, I am continually with you. You hold my right hand. You guide me with your counsel. And afterward, you will receive me to glory. You know what he's saying? I kind of checked out of my relationship with God because I looked around and was playing the comparison game and I was losing. But you know where God was? God was there all along. And God was holding him and not letting him go despite what it is that he was doing in his relationship with God. Have you ever seen those movies where, somebody's hanging off the edge of a cliff and it's like a hand comes in and grabs their hand and pulls them to safety? And what he's talking about is I had that moment where I was feeling like I needed a hand. I was about to slip and fall off the edge. And God's hand was there the whole time. Despite the fact that I had checked out, God stayed there and his hand was there. And we say, well, that's so nice for him, but I'm not sure, how somebody like me, finds that same place. And I think we can get there, maybe even in an easier way than the writer Asaph does of this psalm. Because what he didn't know, because it was still in the future, is that one day God was going to leave heaven. And Jesus, God the Son, was going to come to earth. And he was going to live the perfect life, the life we should have lived, but we couldn't. He was going to sacrifice that life on a cross in our place and take our hit. And when Jesus called out and basically extended a hand, I need a hand, and there was none. And he did that so that we could know that irregardless of the moments in which we even struggle in our relationship with God, he will not let us go. He will hold us by his right hand. And so maybe wherever you've been in your journey, if it's been a little bit difficult in your relationship with God for whatever reason, you know what? He is right there. He has not let you go. And we are safe and secure because of his grace, his love, and his power. And if it's time to recheck in, that's exactly what this guy was doing. And he was saying, you've never moved. You never let me go. I was having a hard time, but God, you never let me go. So the solution is not, information. What he's telling us is a solution is more of an experiential deal, that we recognize that there is a God that truly loves us. It's not just knowing some facts about God. It's knowing that he will not abandon us. And one day, Jesus said these things, that I will never leave you or forsake you, even to the end of the age. He will hold you by his right hand. So what does all of that mean for us? Let me kind of wind this down here with a picture. I don't know if you've ever seen this game that's on the screens. It's called Balloon Stomp. And it's where balloons are tied to the ankles of children. And there's a man by the name of Jim Roberts who tells a story about going to observe his daughter's 4th grade classroom, and they were going to play Balloon Stomp. And so they went down to the gym, and the class came in. Balloons are tied around there. And this game, like in the scheme of things, is like a Darwinian kind of game. It is survival of the fittest. And there were even some people who decided right out of the chute, you know what, I'm not even going to play this game. They popped their own balloons. They kind of committed balloon suicide there as they were getting started, because they were like, I don't even want to do this. And you know who wins Balloon Stomp when it is played in the manner in which people are called to play it? The biggest, strongest kid wins. And everybody else is just unhappy. Well, after that class played that game, and sure enough, the biggest, strongest guy won, they go out, and in that gym class comes a class of intellectually challenged students, and they're going to play Balloon Stomp. And Jim Roberts, who tells the story, thinks, oh no, what is going to unfold in this next version of this game? And so they're given the rules, just like the previous class, of what it is and how to play it and all of that. And so they start. And they got the whole idea of popping balloons down and, balloons start to pop, but they missed the whole competitive part. Because instead of, the biggest and the strongest just pushing and bullying, the weakest who were in the room, one girl would hold out her balloon and let somebody else stomp it. And then in turn, he did the same thing and she got to stomp it. And all over the room, they were playing a different game. And at the very end, when the last balloon was popped, you know what the whole class did? They all cheered. Everybody won. Everybody won. And so here's a question for us. What game are we going to play? We can play the comparison game, and it'll either lead us to a place of superiority or inferiority. Neither one of those is what God has in store for us. We can compare ourselves and find ourselves wanting all day long. Or we can play a game that is so much better than that. The game that lives first and foremost with the identity that God gives us and the value that he gives to us. Where we can even celebrate the success of other people. And we can be okay with that. And also knowing that we can look up and we can look ahead, and there's another day coming in which God will make all things right. In this world, that's not where we are yet. But to play the comparison game will lead us to a place where we lose. Envy and comparison is the game that no one ever wins. Let's not play that game. Would you bow your heads together with me? God, thank you for who you are. Thank you for your patience and your desire to walk alongside us, sometimes even in spite of who we are. And God, even on our worst day, in a relationship with you, you haven't gone anywhere. And you continue to hold us. You continue to sustain us. You continue to pour out your gifts upon us. And God, in response to that, may we not play the envy and comparison game, the game that we can never win, because there'll always be somebody that by our standards is doing better, who has more, who's been more blessed. But God, it just isn't about that. And I pray, God, that you would lead us toward a better understanding of how much your love has come, not only to our rescue, and it certainly has, but also to stand by us, even on the hard days, the difficult days, the days we have more questions than answers, the days in which we look around and we're not sure about fairness and even maybe a sense of just honor in this life. And God, in those moments, may we look to you and may we recalibrate who we are in your eyes. And may we remember what it takes to untangle us from some of the webs that want to junk us up. And it is an honest-to-goodness experience with the true and the living God. So lead us in that direction, God. Maybe even not just to hear a song, but to be inside of a song that speaks and sings to our own hearts about what we need to hear from you. So lead us in that direction, God, for your name's sake. We ask and pray. In Jesus' name, amen.
We hope you enjoyed today's message. If you found this sermon meaningful, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Your support helps us reach more people and spread the word. Stay connected with us throughout the week by following us on social media at Washington Heights Church on Facebook and Instagram, and by visiting our website at whc.faith. For more information and additional resources, check out the podcast description below. Thank you for joining us. See you next week.